Imagine a workplace where almost nothing is forbidden. No permission slips, no endless approvals, no rigid rulebook watching your every move. You can spend company money as you see fit. You can take as much vacation as you need. You can make bold decisions without waiting for a boss to say yes. It sounds like chaos. But it isn't. Because in this company, freedom comes with one non-negotiable demand. You must be exceptional. This is not a fantasy office. This is Netflix, a company that tore up the traditional rulebook of management and rebuilt it around trust, talent, and responsibility. A culture that chose people over process, honesty over politeness, and speed over bureaucracy. Tonight's story is not just about how Netflix works. It is about a deeper question every leader, employee, and creator must face. Do rules make us better, or do they make us smaller? Welcome to English Bookshelf. And this is No Rules Rules. Imagine walking into a company where no one asks for permission. No long approval chains. No rigid policies. No suffocating bureaucracy. You can spend company money as you see fit. Take as much vacation as you need. Make bold decisions without waiting for your boss. But there is a catch. You are expected to perform at the very highest level. Not average. Not good enough. Only exceptional. This is not a fantasy workplace. This is Netflix, a company that dared to break almost every traditional rule of management, and in doing so, became one of the most powerful, innovative, and influential organizations in the world. This story begins not with success, but with failure. Before Netflix was a global streaming giant, it was a struggling DVD rental company fighting for survival. Reed Hastings, its co-founder, was a brilliant engineer but an inexperienced leader. Like most executives, he built systems around control, rules, processes, approvals, and safeguards designed to prevent mistakes. And then one of those rules destroyed millions of dollars in value. A talented employee made a critical decision without seeking approval. It was risky. It broke protocol. And it turned out to be exactly what the company needed. But Reed had created a culture where people were afraid to act without permission. He realized something unsettling. In trying to eliminate mistakes, he was also eliminating brilliance. That moment became the seed of a radical idea. What if, instead of controlling people through rules, you trusted them with freedom? Not naive freedom, not chaos. Freedom paired with extreme responsibility. This book takes us inside that experiment. An experiment that would transform Netflix into a cultural laboratory where innovation thrives, average performers are not tolerated, and honesty is valued more than harmony. The traditional corporate world runs on fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of risk, fear of losing control. So companies build layers of rules to protect themselves. Policies, approvals, reviews, and endless processes. But the more rules they create, the slower they become. The more control they impose, the less creative their people feel. Netflix chose the opposite path. Instead of adding rules, they removed them. But they did not remove accountability. That is the heart of this book. Freedom without responsibility leads to chaos. Responsibility without freedom leads to frustration. Netflix chose both. The book introduces the central idea that would define the company: talent density. Instead of managing mediocre employees with strict rules, Netflix decided to hire only stunning colleagues. People so talented, self-motivated, and responsible that they didn't need to be controlled. If you have exceptional people, you don't need bureaucracy. If you have average people, no amount of rules will make your company great. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable for traditional leaders. Most companies optimize for process. Netflix optimized for people. If someone underperformed, they were not put on endless performance improvement plans. They were respectfully let go with generous severance, so the company could maintain a culture of excellence. Harsh? Perhaps. But brutally honest. Netflix believed that a team of fewer, extraordinary people would outperform a larger team of average ones every single time. From there, the book takes us deeper into the idea of radical transparency. In most organizations, people hide uncomfortable truths. They sugarcoat feedback. They avoid conflict. They protect egos at the cost of progress. Netflix did the opposite. They built a culture where employees were expected to give candid, sometimes painful feedback, not behind closed doors, but openly and constructively. Not to humiliate, but to improve. Meetings became places of honest debate, not polite agreement. Leaders were not above criticism. Even Reed Hastings himself was fair game. At first, this felt brutal. People were uncomfortable. Feelings were hurt. Some employees left. But over time, something remarkable happened. The organization became smarter. Decisions improved. Egos softened. Ideas became stronger. Honesty replaced politics. The book explains that transparency is not about being rude, it is about respecting people enough to tell them the truth. And truth, while painful in the short term, is powerful in the long term. Another revolutionary idea emerges. Context, not control. Instead of telling employees exactly what to do, Netflix leaders focused on giving them clear context, the company's goals, strategy, and values. Once people understood the bigger picture, they were trusted to make decisions independently. No micromanagement, no constant approvals, no rigid procedures, just intelligent people using their judgment. This approach shocked traditional business thinkers. Most companies believe control creates reliability. Netflix believed trust created excellence. As this first part of the story unfolds, the listener begins to see Netflix not as just a company, but as a living experiment in human behavior. A place where adults are treated like adults, where freedom is not a perk, but a responsibility, where mistakes are not punished, but stupidity is not tolerated. The book paints a picture of a workplace that is not comfortable, but incredibly alive. High expectations, high autonomy, high accountability, and beneath all of it lies a simple but powerful belief. Great people don't need rules. They need clarity. They need trust. They need purpose. And when you give them that, they will do extraordinary things. This is only the beginning. Because as Netflix grew from DVDs to streaming, from startup to global giant, these principles would be tested again and again in crisis, competition, and rapid transformation. And every time, the same question would return. Do you build a company that controls people? Or do you build a company that trusts them? That question becomes the heartbeat of this entire book. As the story moves forward, the book steps inside the living bloodstream of Netflix. Not the brand, not the headlines, but the day-to-day culture where ideas are born, argued over, shaped, and sometimes destroyed. Freedom, the book reminds us, is easy to romanticize. It is far harder to live. In most organizations, leaders claim they want innovation, but their systems scream the opposite. Layers of approval, endless checklists, meetings that exist only to cover risk, rules designed not to protect creativity, but to protect leaders from blame. Netflix chose a different path. They treated rules like medicine, only to be used when absolutely necessary. If a process was created to prevent one mistake, but slow down 100 decisions, they removed it. If a policy existed only to control a few irresponsible people, they fired those people instead of punishing everyone else. This is where the idea of freedom with responsibility stops being a slogan and becomes a lived reality. Employees at Netflix are trusted with enormous autonomy. They can spend company money without pre-approval. They can decide how long they need for vacation. They can take bold risks without waiting for permission. But that freedom sits on a razor-sharp expectation. You must act in the best interest of Netflix at all times. Not your ego. Not your convenience. Not your department. The company. The book describes real moments where this philosophy was tested. A senior employee, spends a large sum on a business decision without consulting anyone. In a traditional company, this would trigger punishment. At Netflix, the question was different. Did the person act thoughtfully? Did they understand the context? Were they genuinely trying to help the company succeed? If yes, the decision was respected even if it failed. If no, the problem wasn't the spending, it was the person. This reveals one of the book's most radical insights. Netflix does not manage behavior with rules. They manage behavior by managing talent. If you hire the right people, you don't need to babysit them. If you hire the wrong people, no policy will save you. The book then takes us deeper into the idea of context over control. Instead of micromanaging, Netflix leaders obsess over clarity. They work tirelessly to ensure that everyone understands the company's goals, strategy, and values. When people have clear context, they can make smart decisions on their own. Meetings are not about approval. They are about alignment. Leaders do not say, "Do this." They say, "Here's where we're going. Here's why. What do you think?" And in that space, intelligence multiplies. The culture becomes a collective brain instead of a hierarchy. But this freedom also creates tension. Not everyone thrives in it. Some people want instructions. They want certainty. They want protection from responsibility. Netflix culture is uncomfortable for them. It demands independence, judgment, and emotional maturity. The book is brutally honest here. Netflix is not for everyone. It is not designed to be a family where everyone is safe forever. It is designed to be a championship team where only top performers stay on the field. When someone no longer fits the culture, Netflix does not drag them along. They are offered a generous severance package and the freedom to find a better environment. The message is clear but respectful. You are not bad. You are just not right for this team. This approach shocks traditional managers, but the book argues that it is kinder and more honest than pretending someone is performing when they are not. From here, the book explores the role of radical candor in more depth. Feedback at Netflix is not an annual ritual, it is constant. Employees are encouraged to give sunshine feedback, praise that is specific and meaningful, and constructive feedback, which is direct, respectful, and actionable. No backroom gossip. No political whispering. No sugarcoating. If something is wrong, it is said openly. At first, this feels harsh. People are not used to being told uncomfortable truths. But over time, something remarkable happens. Egos shrink. Ideas grow stronger. Trust deepens. When you know that people will tell you the truth, you stop guessing. You stop second-guessing. You start focusing on improvement instead of image. The book describes a powerful paradox. Kindness is not always gentle. Sometimes kindness is honest. Netflix chooses honesty even when it stings. As the company evolves from DVD rentals to global streaming, these principles are tested on a much larger scale. When Netflix decides to pivot from DVDs to streaming, it is not a safe decision. Investors panic. Critics mock. Employees are uncertain. In a traditional company, leadership might have controlled every step. At Netflix, they share the context openly. They explain the risk. They explain the strategy. They invite debate. And then they trust their people to execute. This is where the culture proves its worth. Instead of slowing down, Netflix accelerates. Innovation becomes natural because people feel ownership. Responsibility becomes collective because freedom is shared. Creativity flourishes because fear of punishment disappears. But the book never paints this as a utopia. There are costs. High pressure, high expectations, emotional intensity. Netflix is not a cozy place to hide. It is a place where excellence is demanded and rewarded. And yet, for those who thrive in it, it becomes addictive. They feel alive. They feel trusted. They feel respected. As this section of the story closes, the central tension deepens. Most companies believe control creates safety. Netflix believes freedom creates greatness. Most leaders fear losing control. Netflix fears losing talent. And the book begins to push a larger question toward the listener. If you were building a company, would you design it to protect people from mistakes or to empower them to do their best work? That question lingers as the narrative prepares to move even deeper into leadership, culture, and what it truly means to build a high-performance organization. The book now shifts its focus from culture to leadership, not leadership as a title, but leadership as behavior. Inside Netflix, leaders are not defined by how much control they wield, but by how much clarity they create. They are not commanders issuing orders from the top of a pyramid. They are gardeners shaping an environment where smart people can do their best thinking. This is where the story becomes more personal. Reed Hastings does not present himself as a flawless visionary. He appears instead as a student of his own company, constantly learning, correcting, and sometimes admitting he was wrong. Leadership at Netflix, the book suggests, is less about having all the answers and more about asking the right questions. In traditional organizations, leaders often hide uncertainty. They project confidence even when they are confused because they believe doubt will weaken authority. At Netflix, leaders do the opposite. They openly share what they do not know. They invite debate. They encourage disagreement. Conflict, in this culture, is not a threat. It is fuel. Meetings are not polite rituals of nodding heads. They are arenas of rigorous thinking. Ideas clash. Assumptions are challenged. Ego is secondary to truth. And the best idea, not the highest-ranking person, wins. The book describes how this approach reshapes decision-making. Instead of slow, bureaucratic approvals, decisions move quickly because context is widely understood. Instead of top-down directives, employees are empowered to act. Leaders spend less time controlling and more time communicating vision, strategy, and purpose. One of the most striking contrasts in the book is between prevention and innovation. Most companies design systems to prevent mistakes. Netflix designs systems to encourage bold decisions. Where traditional management asks, how do we stop people from messing up? Netflix asks, how do we help great people do amazing things? This mindset becomes especially clear in moments of crisis. When Netflix faces fierce competition from companies like Blockbuster, Amazon, and later Disney and HBO, panic would have been a natural response. Many companies would have tightened control, added more rules, and centralized power. Netflix does the opposite. They double down on freedom. They trust their people even more. The book walks through pivotal moments in Netflix evolution. The risky shift from DVDs to streaming, the controversial decision to separate DVD and streaming businesses, and the bold investment in original content. Each of these decisions could have destroyed the company. Each required massive trust in employees, leaders, and culture. In a traditional company, such decisions would be locked behind layers of approval, analysis paralysis, and fear of blame. At Netflix, they were debated fiercely, decided boldly, and executed rapidly. Mistakes were made. Some were expensive, but the culture absorbed them, learned from them, and moved forward faster than competitors. The book introduces another crucial idea here: keeping only what truly adds value. Netflix constantly asks a brutal question about every policy, process, and meeting. If this disappeared tomorrow, would we really miss it? If the answer is no, it goes. This ruthless simplicity is part of what makes Netflix agile. They refuse to accumulate unnecessary rules, traditions, or habits just because that's how things are done. As the company grows globally, the book shows how this philosophy is tested across cultures. What works in Silicon Valley does not automatically work in Japan, Brazil, or India. Erin Meyer brings in her expertise on cross-cultural communication to explain how Netflix adapts its principles without diluting them. Freedom and responsibility look different in different cultural contexts, but the core remains the same: trust people, give them context, and expect excellence. The story also touches on a deeply human tension. Freedom can be exhilarating, but it can also be terrifying. Without clear rules, some employees feel exposed. Without a safety net, they must rely on judgment, courage, and self-awareness. Netflix does not deny this. It embraces it. The culture is designed for adults who want ownership, not comfort. And this leads to one of the book's most profound insights. A great culture is not about making everyone happy. It is about creating the right environment for the right people to do extraordinary work. Netflix is not trying to be universally loved. It is trying to be exceptionally effective. As this part of the narrative unfolds, the listener begins to see Netflix not just as a company, but as a philosophy in action, a living experiment in what happens when you treat people as capable, responsible, and intelligent. The book subtly challenges traditional leadership assumptions. What if control is not a sign of strength? What if trust is? What if rules do not create reliability? What if talent and context do? By the end of the section, a deeper question emerges, not just for CEOs, but for anyone who leads, manages, or works with others. Do you build systems around fear or around trust? Do you design your organization to prevent the worst or to enable the best? That question hangs in the air as the story prepares to move toward its final movement, where the book ties everything together into a larger vision of what work, leadership, and human potential could look like in a world with fewer rules and more responsibility. As the book moves toward its conclusion, it widens its lens. It is no longer just about Netflix. It is about the future of work, leadership, and what it means to build organizations in a world that is faster, more uncertain, and more creative than ever before. The central argument crystallizes into something simple, radical, and deeply human. Rules were designed for an industrial age, but talent belongs to the creative age. Traditional management was built for factories, predictable tasks, standardized processes, interchangeable workers. In that world, control made sense. Procedures prevented chaos. Hierarchies created efficiency. Rules protected quality. But the world Netflix operates in is different. It is messy, fast, unpredictable, driven by ideas, judgment, and creativity rather than assembly lines. In this world, rigid control does not create safety, it creates irrelevance. The companies that win are not the ones that eliminate mistakes, but the ones that learn fastest. And learning requires freedom. The book circles back to its core idea. Freedom and responsibility are not opposites. They are partners. Each without the other is dangerous. Freedom without responsibility becomes chaos. Responsibility without freedom becomes bureaucracy. Together, they create excellence. Netflix culture is not presented as a universal template that every organization should copy blindly. Instead, it is offered as a thought experiment, a provocation that challenges the assumptions most leaders never question. What if you trusted people more than your policies? What if you optimized for talent instead of process? What if honesty mattered more than harmony? What if context replaced control? The authors gently but firmly dismantle the comforting myth that complexity requires rules. They argue that complexity actually requires judgment, and judgment thrives in environments of trust. One of the most powerful lessons of the book arrives here. Great cultures are not built by piling on policies. They are built by removing fear. Fear of speaking up. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of being honest. Fear of losing control. When fear decreases, intelligence increases. When trust increases, speed increases. When talent is valued above process, innovation becomes natural instead of forced. The book also confronts a difficult truth about leadership. Many leaders love the idea of freedom, but only until it threatens their own power. True freedom means accepting that you are not the smartest person in the room, that others will make decisions without you, that control is an illusion. Netflix model asks leaders to trade authority for influence, command for clarity, and ego for impact. That is not easy. It requires emotional maturity, humility, and confidence in people rather than in hierarchy. The narrative then returns to the human side of this culture. Working at Netflix is not relaxed. It is intense. It is demanding. It is emotionally honest. People who thrive there often describe it as the most challenging and rewarding environment of their careers. People who do not fit leave, not with bitterness, but with clarity. And that is part of the design. A great culture does not try to make everyone comfortable. It tries to make the right people extraordinary. As the book closes, it invites the listener to reflect personally, not just professionally. What would your life look like if you lived with more freedom and more responsibility? If you trusted yourself more? If you expected excellence from yourself without needing rigid rules? If you treated mistakes as data instead of shame? The lessons of no rules are not limited to COS. They apply to teams, families, friendships, and even self-leadership. At its heart, the book is not really about Netflix. It is about what happens when you treat people like capable adults, when you assume good intent, when you give context instead of commands, when you value talent over paperwork, when you choose trust over control. The final image the book leaves us with is not a boardroom or a streaming platform. It is a simple, powerful idea. Imagine a world where organizations are not built on fear, but on trust, where leaders create clarity instead of constraints, where people are free to think, act, and take responsibility, where honesty replaces politics, where excellence is the norm, not the exception. Netflix did not build a perfect culture. They built a brave one, a culture that says, we will treat you like an adult, and we expect you to act like one. A culture that accepts risk in exchange for brilliance. A culture that proves that fewer rules can sometimes create better results. And that is the message you want your listeners on English Bookshelf to carry with them. Rules can keep you safe, but trust can make you great. Bureaucracy can protect you from mistakes, but freedom can unlock your potential. In a world that is changing faster than ever, the companies and the people who thrive will not be the ones who cling to control. They will be the ones who dare to trust. They will be the ones who combine freedom with responsibility. They will be the ones who understand that the best systems are not built around fear of failure, but around faith in human capability. And that is the quiet revolution at the heart of no rules. Not chaos, not recklessness, but a bold belief in people. Because when you give great people freedom, clarity, and responsibility, they don't need rules. They create something far more powerful. They create excellence. In the end, this book is not really about Netflix. It is about what happens when you treat people like capable adults. When you replace control with trust. When you replace rules with clarity. When you replace fear with responsibility. Rules can keep you safe, but trust can make you great. Bureaucracy can prevent mistakes, but freedom can unlock brilliance. Netflix did not build a perfect culture. They built a brave one where honesty hurts, expectations are high, and excellence is the standard. And that is the idea this story leaves us with. Great people don't need to be controlled. They need to be trusted. If you want to build something extraordinary, a company, a team, or even your own life, remember this. Fewer rules, more responsibility, greater impact. Thank you for listening. This is English Bookshelf, where books don't just teach. They reshape how you think about the world.